170519, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Real Estate Taxes by creating a tax foreclosure diversion program that requires housing counseling assistance, updating tax installment payment agreements to help taxpayers with financial hardships and other related items, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Please identify yourself and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. Frank Breslin, Revenue Commissioner, with me.
Marissa Waxman, First Deputy Revenue Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Blackwell and members of the Committee on Finance. I am Frank Breslin, Revenue Commissioner and Chief Collections Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on Bill 170519, which seeks to help our most vulnerable homeowners avoid foreclosure and remain tax compliant. The administration, and particularly the Department of Revenue, are in complete agreement that helping homeowners stay in their homes is a moral and financial obligation we have to our residents. Several years ago, the Department of Revenue, the Law Department, Community Legal Services, and City Council worked collaboratively for approximately 18 months to develop the Owner-Occupied Payment Agreement, we call UPA. For most homeowners, UPA ties their monthly payment for delinquent real estate taxes to their ability to pay. Thousands of individuals and families have entered the program and are making their monthly payments and are protected from further enforcement and additional interest and penalties. Offering UPA while continuing to improve our collection efforts has led to a meaningful reduction in the number of non-compliant taxpayers while generating more than $100 million annually from delinquent collections to fund city services and the School District of Philadelphia. Now that we have a few years' experience with UPA, we can see that there are still some gaps in this safety net. In particular, low-income homeowners who cannot afford to pay the current year bill, a requirement under UPA, are still struggling. Bill 170519 offers a starting point for the team that developed UPA and others to come together again to design a solution that will protect these homeowners. We met last Thursday with Council President's staff about ideas to develop these initial proposals into a successful program. We discussed how to engage more stakeholders, like the legal services and housing counseling agencies, various city departments, community and civic leaders, and the homeowners themselves into the process of designing a program to meet our shared goal of keeping homeowners in their homes and avoiding the threat of tax foreclosure. We look forward to collaborating on this effort. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. That's so important. Councilman Don?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for your testimony. I'm just curious on the UPA program, what's the lowest monthly payment available?
$25 per month.
$25 per month?
Yes.
And then if it's an example, I'm not familiar with it, but if the tax bill is $1,000 a year, and I'm paying $25 a month, what happens to the balance of that money?
The balance kind of, it's frozen, and it sits until such time that the property is sold, and then the delinquency would be satisfied.
And does it sit there with interest or without interest?
Without interest and penalty.
So it's an interest-free loan until the transfer of the property occurs?
Correct.
And then if you were to design another program, you're talking about a payment less than $25 a month?
Possibly. There's other opportunities. As I said in my testimony, one of the things that's a requirement of UPA is to use the $25 a month example. A taxpayer who's in that agreement and paying $25 a month, when their New Year's tax liability rolls on, the requirement is to stay current on that. And that has been an obstacle for some taxpayers to remain current in their UPA agreement. Now, although the law doesn't require it, the department, when made aware of those situations, we've been allowing the taxpayers to remain in UPA. We've basically been taking their current year liability when they can show a hardship and inability to pay, and putting that balance into the UPA and allowing them to just continue to make their $25 a month payment.
So what you're saying is the UPA bill says the first year I can pay $25, but after that I got to pay the full amount. But you've been allowing them to pay the $25 a month going forward.
Correct.
And so, in your opinion, what kind of a alternative would be to paying $25 a month?
Well, some of the things discussed would be to formalize that ability to roll the current year taxes into the UPA agreement. That would allow the current program to exist with revision, as opposed to designing a completely separate deferral program. But really the goal is, I mean, this was one meeting and, a little bit of brainstorming, but we really want to get all the stakeholders into a room and really discuss what the options are. I mean, we really committed during that 18 months where we were doing UPA, and we met, very frequently and for a long period of time, and came up with a program that has been very effective, I believe, but as I testified, and as has been exhibited, it still left some gaps in that safety net, and we're committed to try to close those.
Is there a requirement to get into UPA or any of these payment plans that we have them go through the EITC and make sure see if they qualify so they can get even more money?
Well, one of the things that we do when anyone comes in for an UPA or one of our low-income agreements is we make sure that we make them, our service reps make them aware of the earned income tax credit so that they're not missing out on that.
Right. And there's other programs also available. I guess all the plans that are available, I just want to make sure that they've signed off and said, so we can get them as much money as possible, to help them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was the goal of this. Is to, and the Department of Revenue is committed to trying to increase enrollment in all of the assistance programs. And this past year, the current fiscal year, we brought on an administrator for assistance programs in for both the tax side and the water side of the department.
And so, have you ever, after they enter the UPA program, do we do any kind of cross-marketing to those people, telling them again about earned income tax credit and other programs?
We do.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much. The next panel on this subject will be Erwin Trouse, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, Monty Wilson and Rocco Labrosiano, Community Legal Services, and Will Gonzalez, Executive Director, SEBA. Thank you. Good afternoon. Please identify yourself in any order and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. My name is Catherine Martin. I'm a staff attorney at Community Legal Services. I'm here with my client, Rocco Labrosiano. Community Legal Services of Philadelphia has long been an advocate of low-income homeowners. Today, we support Council President Clark's proposed bill to create a tax diversion program and a tax deferral program. In support of the tax deferral program, we offer the testimony of my client, Mr. Rocco Labrosiano, who is a low-income Philadelphian who would benefit from the protections of a tax deferral program.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Rocco Labrosiano. I reside 1731 South Mole Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 19145 is the zip code. My mother and father are the record owners of my home in South Philadelphia. I lived in the home all my life. My mother passed away in 1998. My father was a retired federal police officer, a captain at that. He is deceased now. I used to work for the Philadelphia School Board, and I was injured on the job. And I was shot 6 times in the back. I was saving my little daughter. She was only 4 at the time. I had been operated on this problem many times for that. And I had 2 heart attacks. I'm crippled. I have a paralysis in my left leg. I am on lots of medicines. And I'm not well at all. My only income is $735 a month in Social Security. If I lose my home, I will have nowhere to go. I lived there all my life. I don't know no other house. I've tried everything in my power to do everything that I can, but it doesn't cover everything. When you're hungry, no one hears your stomach growling but you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, and we're praying for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Erwin Traus with Philadelphia Legal Assistance. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of this bill, which is an immensely important bill. I'm with Philadelphia Legal Assistance, where I've worked for the last 22 years. I've been an attorney representing low-income homeowners in an attempt to prevent them from losing their homes to tax and mortgage foreclosure for the past 42 years. I would like to first applaud the testimony of the Revenue Commissioner, Mr. Breslin, in his recognition that the robust protections that are in place currently for preventing low-income homeowners from losing their homes has some gaps. There are holes in the safety net through which people are falling. And the people, in our experience, that are falling through those safety net are the most vulnerable, the people most in need of affordable housing, the minority homeowners. And it's our experience running the Save Your Home Philly hotline, which is supported by the Department of Housing and Community Development of the City of Philadelphia. We run the hotline. It was originally a hotline designed to protect homeowners from mortgage foreclosure as part of the City of Philadelphia's mortgage foreclosure prevention program, and as part of the First Judicial District's mortgage foreclosure diversion program. In recent years, tax foreclosures have now far outstripped mortgage foreclosures as the primary source of people, low-income people, losing their homes. I have attached, I'm not going to read my testimony, I'm going to try to summarize it. I've attached to my testimony, I don't know if council members have that, but there are 2 charts and a map attached. The graph number 1 shows that in around 2012 or 2013, tax foreclosures began to exceed mortgage foreclosures as the kinds of properties we've been seeing. Graph number 2 shows dramatic increase in tax foreclosures from the period 2010 through 2015 to the beginning of 2016. And the map at the end of my testimony, I think, dramatically demonstrates part of the problem with the present tax foreclosure sale practices of the City of Philadelphia. A fairly cursory look at that map demonstrates that the overwhelming number of properties that are being sold for tax sales, and this is residential properties. This is a map, as best could be determined, of the residential properties that are being sold, that are subject to petition, tax sale petitions in the City of Philadelphia for the year 2016. The vast majority of them are in minority majority minority census areas of the city of Philadelphia. 85% or 84% of the properties that are subject to tax petitions, residential properties, are in minority, majority census tracts in the city. Which means it's our experience, and this is anecdotal experience from the people who we see coming to us for help. It's our experience that the tax sales that are actually taking place are tax sales of people who are falling through the safety net because they are infirm, elderly, have insufficient incomes to allow them to pay the current taxes on their homes, are otherwise vulnerable. And what we are also seeing is that often these sales are for relatively low tax balances, and the sales themselves are usually for a fraction of the value of the property. And what we see is that the city of Philadelphia, unintentionally, I'm sure, is acting as an agent for the transfer of wealth from our minority communities and our minority homeowners to speculators and property flippers. And this bill, which we endorse, and we also endorse some further steps that the Revenue Commissioner has indicated his willingness to consider, this bill goes a long way by creating a diversion program and a deferral of prospective taxes, or a part of prospective taxes. By doing that, this bill goes a long way to enable the city to ensure that its tax collection practices are in line with its objectives and its policies, which are policies of avoiding and ending homelessness, ensuring that low-income elderly folks and elderly folks in general can age in place, and promoting minority ownership, home ownership, and taking steps to protect the wealth that's been accumulated by our minority citizens in their real property, rather than seeing that wealth decimated and transferred to private business interests. So in closing, I'd like to once again thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to in particular thank Council President Clark for inviting me to address this bill and to share our experiences on the hotline with what we're seeing. And I'd be happy to answer questions either now or at the end of the panel's testimony.
Thank you.
Do you wish to hold questions till we've all spoken?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak today in support of Bill 170519. Community Legal Services strongly supports this bill, which adds two very significant protections to our city's most vulnerable homeowners when they're struggling to pay their annual real estate taxes owed on their most valuable asset, their homes. First, the bill creates a property tax foreclosure diversion program, similar to Philadelphia's nationally renowned mortgage foreclosure diversion program. Tax delinquent homeowners would be referred to housing counseling and legal services agencies early and often during the collection process for assistance applying for programs such as the homestead exception, the senior tax freeze, and the owner-occupied payment agreement program. Second, the bill creates a property tax deferral program, which would allow our most vulnerable homeowners, families living in deep poverty, the elderly, people who are physically and mentally disabled, to defer payment of real estate taxes owed on their homes. This would allow these homeowners to remain in their homes rather than losing their homes at a tax sale and pushing them into the city's shelter system, nursing homes, hospitals, and streets, sometimes at a net cost to the city. I am a supervising attorney at Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, where we provide free legal services and representation to low-income Philadelphians. When I began working at CLS, my work focused on defending homeowners facing mortgage foreclosures or predatory lending by private banks. Since 2004, I've represented an increasing number of homeowners who are facing legal action by the city to collect delinquent property taxes owed on their homes, a property tax foreclosure. Since 2009, the city has sharply increased its collection of these taxes, collecting an estimated $1.3 billion in real estate in fiscal year 2016, an increase of $100 million from 2015. As noted by Council President Clark, along with this increase in revenue, there's been a 1,200% spike in the number of tax foreclosure actions filed by the city from 2010 to 2016, with 4,450 of those tax foreclosures filed against owner-occupied homes in 2016. We recognize that the city needs this money to provide services and funds for our schools. At the same time, however, City Council and Mayor Kenny must recognize the impact that this tax increase and increase in collections and tax foreclosures has on the most vulnerable homeowners, as well as on our communities and our neighborhoods. Community Legal Services advised over 300 homeowners struggling with delinquent property taxes in 2016, and we're on track to see another 300 similar homeowners this year. Problems with delinquent property taxes are now the #1 issue which comes to our office in North Philadelphia on intake for advice. Yet I think CLS and PLA, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, are seeing only the tip of the iceberg. We can estimate that there are at least 20,000 residential homestead properties with tax delinquencies outstanding, and I believe the number is probably closer to 25,000. Not all these homeowners are necessarily low income. However, in a city where 26% of Philadelphians live in poverty and 184,000 Philadelphians live in deep poverty on less than $850 a month for a family of 3, we can safely say that there are thousands of low-income homeowners who are struggling each month with a choice to pay for either food, water, or property taxes. Many of these poorest homeowners are elderly and living on fixed Social Security benefits. Others, like Mr. Labraciano, are surviving on disability benefits. These are the most vulnerable homeowners who are slipping through the city's current safety net. Bill 170519 is a significant step towards improving the safety net in 2 important ways. First, it broadens the net by creating the tax diversion program that will allow the Department of Revenue to quickly refer eligible homeowners to housing, counseling, and legal service agencies as early as possible. These agencies can provide advice and assistance in applying for payment plans or other tax relief programs, or help homeowners deal with the threat and anxiety of a tax foreclosure filing against their home. A tax diversion program will need to be paid for and funded, but the cost should be reduced since Philadelphia already has an active system of housing, counseling, and legal service agencies in place under the current mortgage diversion program. Any new cost will involve expanding the current system, not simply creating it out of whole cloth. Additionally, every time a proposed diversion program helps a taxpayer enter into a payment plan or resolve litigation, the city will save on considerable time and expense in court costs, attorney's fees, and other charges of litigation. We will be submitting a set of proposed amendments to the bill, which should clarify that access to housing, counseling, and legal service agencies should occur early, often, and throughout the process. These referrals should begin when the initial bills are sent out in November or December, throughout any foreclosure litigation, and even after the sale, so homeowners can be advised of their right of redemption. Nevertheless, we applaud the fundamental idea that expanding the safety net by using the system of local agencies we already have in place throughout the neighborhoods in Philadelphia to help all homeowners, not just the poorest, to successfully pay their property taxes and to access tax relief programs like the homestead exemption and the owner-occupied payment agreement program. The bill also adds an additional layer to the safety net by creating a property tax deferral program, allowing low-income homeowners, seniors, and others who can show significant financial hardship to defer payment of all or part of their residential property taxes. The deferred taxes would accrue interest and come due when the homeowner dies or the property is sold. The bill also caps the total of annual deferrals, allowing the city to accurately predict the maximum financial cost of the program. For homeowners living in deep poverty, a full or partial deferral may be the only way they can afford to rein them in their homes. Living on less than $750 a month, Mr. Labraciano struggles but pays his bills each month. I have other elderly clients who are surviving on food stamps and Meals on Wheels, but simply have nothing left over at the end of the year to pay their annual property taxes. Some of my clients suffer from physical and mental disabilities, which makes paying the bills even more challenging. The proposed deferral program would help many of these homeowners to shelter in place, sometimes at considerably less cost to the city than if they were forced into the shelter system. For example, Mr. Labraciano's home was sold to collect less than $6,000 total in water and tax bills. Without CLS's help to set aside the sale, if Rocco Labraciano had been ejected and moved into the shelter system, even at the lowest cost of $40 per night per a bed for a shelter bed, Mr. Labraciano would have cost the city $14,600 annually. That's a net loss to the city of $8,600. If he was elderly or had children or required hospitalization or other social services, the cost to the city could have been dramatically higher. The proposed tax deferral program recognizes that in certain situations, it is simply more cost-effective for the city to allow some homeowners to shelter in place in their homes rather than to foreclose on them for a relatively small amount of money and incur greater costs later on. We urge the committee to vote in favor of this bill. Property taxes affect us all, but in a city with one of the highest rates of low-income homeownership in the nation, property taxes have the most impact on Philadelphia's poorest and most vulnerable homeowners. Without the programs contained in this bill, the city's increased collection efforts, though well-intentioned, threaten to substantially reduce the city's stock of affordable housing. The diversion program and the deferral program proposed by this bill go a long way to set a policy that says to these vulnerable homeowners, you're not just a source of revenue. You are all part of Philadelphia's neighborhoods and communities. Each of you, each individual, each family has a value. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Yes, Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have a question for the panel. Do you think, I'm going to make sure I understand, the bill recommends total deferral of all taxes. The homeowner pays no taxes until they either pass away or they sell the property.
The bill recommends that is an option to have the person defer the taxes. However, it leaves it, right now it doesn't speak to whether the person will necessarily always get a total deferral or a partial deferral. So there is room for the department to allow only a partial deferral.
And the current program, UPA, which has, according to the commissioner, payments down to $25 a month, you don't think, can that program be adjusted to accommodate this, or you think you need a whole new program?
Well, I think, to go back to to the commissioner's earlier response to you, I think it's important to understand that with UPA, you don't just pay $25 a month. It's that there are tiers of payments. So those with the lowest level of income, 30% of area median income in Philadelphia, someone living on $735 a month, they might pay $25 a month towards the delinquency. They still have to maintain the current taxes in full. So if their yearly tax bill is $2,400, they need to be saving another $200 a month on top of that $25. So what I usually explain to clients is your house bill, your rent to stay in your home, is really that $200 for next year's taxes plus another $25 on top of that. What we're running into is some people are able to do that. They can make those 2 monthly payments. But now we're running into the people whose incomes are so low and money is so tight, they can't afford to save up next year's tax bill. It's simply too tight. So simply lowering the monthly payment isn't going to solve the problem.
So if I could, there's a couple issues. One important distinction is that UPA is backward-looking.
Is what?
Backward-looking. The amendments in this bill are forward-looking. So UPA was originally designed to address tax delinquencies. It wasn't designed to address the current obligation to pay taxes, as Monty described. So when you go into an UPA agreement and they say, okay, for the lowest tier, you can pay $25 a month for the back taxes, essentially what's happening is that there's a deferral of those back taxes. You're paying $25 a month on those back taxes. If the property's ever sold, those back taxes will be collected. But you have to pay the current taxes. Now, the current taxes can be small, they can be big, and in many areas of Philadelphia, which once were moderate and low-income areas, they are now growing and often dramatically growing. So looking forward, what we're seeing are people who, one, simply can't afford, as Monty described, may not be able to afford any significant amount of taxes. Simply, if they're living on $700 a month because you're on Social Security or SSI, you've had a lifetime of work, you've paid off your mortgage, and this is a point I want to make. Most of these houses are houses in which people have lived for lifetimes and paid off their mortgages. These are people who, for some reason, after they've paid their mortgages, have limited income, drastically reduced income because of age or disability or some other problem, and now can't, because there's no mortgage. When there was a mortgage, the taxes were being paid. Now there's no mortgage, taxes aren't being paid. So there are people who can't afford even modest taxes sometimes, often can't afford rapidly rising taxes, often don't have the wherewithal to object when the city sometimes wrongfully dramatically increases the value of a property without actually looking at the property to justify the increase. So you have people that are the least able to defend themselves against a sale, and what we see is that's whose houses the city is selling. You know, it may be the city's also selling some commercial properties, but you know, the people who walk into our doors are the people who can't even get it together to take advantage of UPA and all these other things that perhaps could mitigate their taxes. So this is a forward-looking bill, and this forward-looking bill does two things. One is to permit prospectively the deferral of part or all of the taxes based on the person's situation. And that, the bill as currently written requires a year-by-year recertification, forward-looking. And presumably, if the house is ever sold, then the taxes would be come out of the proceeds of the sale. If we get to this point, and if there are changes, we would suggest, we meaning PLA and I think CLS would agree with this, that the process of recovering the taxes be on a shared equity basis. That not every dollar of deferred tax goes to the city, because what you want to do is you want the homeowner to continue to be interested in maintaining the home and in sharing the appreciation of the home, so you're not discouraging people from putting money into the home on the theory that, oh, well, what's the difference when it gets sold? I'm not going to get anything. But that's another discussion. But the primary thing is, one, that there's this forward-looking thing, and if the person's circumstances change, then the amount they pay could go up, so the amount of deferral could go down. The other very, very important piece of this is this bill creates a right on the part of each homeowner to assistance, either from a housing counselor or an attorney, early in the process. And this assistance early in the process can often accomplish what you, Councilman Don, was suggesting, becoming aware of these alternatives where there might be some money, and taking advantage of them to the extent possible. One of the problems we see is also a problem which we haven't been able to resolve yet, and I'm hopeful we will be able to resolve with the Revenue Department, and that is the way the Revenue Department collects taxes. It generally, except with great difficulty, when it accepts taxes, it applies them to the oldest taxes that are due. So it's very difficult to get the Revenue Department to take a payment, even a partial payment, that could be applied to the current year's taxes, which would enable the homeowner to take advantage of the state tax rebate program. And the city is losing out, we believe, on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of potential rebates, which aren't there because the homeowner can't show they paid last year's taxes, which is a requirement for getting the rebate. And there's a couple solutions we want for that. One is changes to the collection process to make it much easier for money to be applied to the current year taxes so that it's easier to get the rebate, and also the possibility of a city program which could front money to the homeowner to pay that year's taxes. Because once that year is paid, the homeowner would be entitled to a rebate for the amount that's paid, which would be a continuing rebate, which every year would essentially be a transfer from the state to the city
on account of taxes.
Think of it as a smaller EITC.
Right.
We are leaving money on the table at the Department of Treasury.
Let me go back to this for a minute. You're saying there's a state program that would reimburse them 100% for their real estate taxes?
Up to $950.
Up to $950.
It's tiered by income again, so as your income increases, you get less back. It's between $350 and up to $975, I believe, dollars.
So we need to figure out how we can work within that program to make sure they get that money.
Correct.
Yes, and this has been a subject of discussion in the past, and I believe the Revenue Department may now be more receptive to that in the context of addressing what is becoming a more obvious problem, and that not only is the city losing money, but it's the current practices is targeting, I think, exactly the people we don't want to be targeting.
How do people qualify for that $950 state money real estate taxes?
You have to be age eligible or disabled, qualify as having a disability, and also income eligible along with age eligible. So it's essentially a senior citizen who is income eligible. Off the top of my head, I believe the single person eligibility is $2,300, but it tiers its way down.
The gentleman that was here before, sitting in the back row, does he qualify?
He would qualify.
Is he getting that money now?
He's not, because he hasn't been able to pay up. He's paying his current taxes in installments, so he hasn't paid in full. What the program that Irwin's describing would do is advance him the funds so that his taxes would then be paid in full, and then the city would be able to get that rebate back from the state.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question. You're an attorney, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
This is just in my mind. I'm trying to figure something out. Some houses might have mortgages on them. So take an example of a $100,000 home with an $80,000 mortgage, and the city does a full deferral program. Does that lender have any rights, or they're going to be upset with us because we're pushing their position on the property higher up because we come before the mortgage company? Do they have any legal action against us?
They have no legal action I can see against the city. When you say us, you mean the city.
Yeah.
Would they be unhappy? I can't speak to whether they'd be unhappy or not, but I could say that if the process was one in which their present position was not threatened by the possibility of an immediate foreclosure, I don't think it would change significantly what's happening now.
But I could see where they might be upset. Take the example of a $100,000 townhouse and a $50,000 mortgage, and someone's in deferral for a long time, and the mortgage is still in the books, and that deferral exceeds the value of the property. They're going to get wiped out.
Well, you do raise a point that I don't think that would happen much these days, because most mortgages now require, as a condition of the mortgage, the escrowing of an amount for taxes and insurance. And now, so the question would be, if a person could apply for and get a deferment, would that be a default under the mortgage?
Right.
And that's a question we'd have to think about. I would argue that it would not be, but...
Well, Councilman, I think most lenders would advance the funds to protect their interest. They would want themselves to be in first position. They typically, most mortgages cover that funds, and then we have to deal with a homeowner who come to us with a mortgage foreclosure. The population we're talking about, those 300 people that have come to CLS, those people by and large are folks who the mortgage is already paid off, or there never was a mortgage. This really is another tier down from kind of the working class folks who have mortgages. We're talking about real deep poverty here.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your testimony today. Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, I just want to make two brief points. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify.
Thank you.
As you know, housing counselors are key to the success of the ordinance. So we respectfully urge you to appropriately fund this program, specifically the housing counseling component, with resources above and beyond what Philadelphia can derive from CDBG. As you know, current administration in Washington is threatening to take CDBG at zero. Also, as you saw today, issues related to tangled title make it difficult for housing counselors to work on these issues, so supporting them is ever more important, especially in communities where these type of tangled title issues are very high, and those are communities where foreign-born residents live and limited English proficient populations. The number of limited English proficient people in Philadelphia is increasing, and so is the number of immigrants. The economic impact of immigrants in the realm of housing is substantial. We want to tap that and keep it alive. Immigrants occupy about 80,000 of the more than 600,000 owner-occupied units in the city. 50% of immigrants in the city are living in owner-occupied housing, and even unauthorized immigrants are doing their part, as 14,000 unauthorized immigrants in the city live in a home they own, according to the Migration Policy Institute. So we are excited that City Council is working on this. We support this effort. We want to continue to work with the city, especially as it ensures that LEP populations are not left out from accessing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilwoman Parker, then Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and let me start by thanking each of you for your testimony. First, Erwin, I want to go to your testimony. You include, and I thank you so much, this is the first time that I've seen a copy of this since the council president first distributed it some time ago, and I appreciate your including a copy of the map that our tech staff developed showing the 2016 property tax foreclosure filings and the list of homeowners. Now, this is important to me because this map defies the narrative that those who are in trouble as it relates to potentially losing their homes from reverse mortgages, from tax foreclosures, from predatory lending, or any of the other ills that we battle against, that they are just those in the city of Philadelphia that are living in deep poverty. And this is extremely important to me because while I see portions of my colleagues' districts included in this map, the entire 9th Councilmanic District that I represent is in this map. But listen to this. My district has one of the most highest home ownership rates in the city of Philadelphia. If the city's average is 52%, the 9th is about 60 to 61%. And we have regions that have up to 77 to 78% home ownership rates. So when we think about the people who are being impacted, I hope you will help us change the narrative so folks know these are not people sitting home, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for government to give them a handout. They were once proudly a part of our working class, moving on up, in the socioeconomic world, and all of a sudden, God struck and said, we're going to allow you the golden grace to grow older, okay, and become more seasoned. Now you're retired. You don't earn the same amount of income that you used to earn, and now you can barely afford to care for what was your greatest asset. Mm-hmm. So help us change the narrative about who's being impacted, and you start by making sure you distribute this map wherever you go so that when people begin to say, tax foreclosures, reverse mortgages going into foreclosure, this only impacts poor people, you show them maps. This map, and you show them that this impacts black, white, brown people in neighborhoods across the city of Philadelphia, as it doesn't discriminate by zip code. Okay? They make a nickel over the income guidelines, so they usually aren't eligible for any programs that are offered. And now they're about to lose their greatest asset. Thank you, and thank Council President Clark for his leadership on this issue.
Thank you.
Amen.
Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Well, Councilwoman Parker has quite eloquently and elegantly articulated what was in my thoughts. Your authenticity and compassion for those who end up in deep poverty is truly admirable, and I think we should not miss the opportunity to acknowledge what you do every day on a daily basis because you think it's not only the right thing to do, but ultimately it's people we know and love and don't know that end up in these awful, heart-wrenching, very sad circumstances.
Thank you.
We appreciate your important work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just follow up on one point that Councilwoman Parker made? You know, a lot of the problems are a result of the success of the city. I mean, the problems of the people we're talking about. As Councilwoman Parker said, this is not just poor people. This is not just it's people who have, spent their lives working and who now might just be over eligible for certain programs. But they're in their position often not because of anything they've done wrong, but because the city is now more attractive and the taxes are going up. So that they're being faced with high tax bills because their property values are going up, and the city is now more aggressive about increasing those values and collecting. And it seems to me that this bill, the way that it's fashioned, addresses a number of issues in actually a very elegant way, because it really encompasses what the Loop program was trying to do and a number of other programs by allowing there to be a deferral of some or all of the taxes based on a person's economic circumstances prospectively. And if properly structured, it could be a fairly efficient way of simply addressing those needs and also addressing the people who find themselves in neighborhoods that are increasing in value or gentrifying or however you want to call it. But it could be a bill that could very much allow people to stay in those neighborhoods, increase the diversity of those neighborhoods, and offset some of the tensions that we're seeing in some neighborhoods as they change.
And as Councilwoman Sanchez often says, and I've learned to understand and respect this, it should not have to be an either-or. We should be able to do both, period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very